Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, November the 27th, 2025. I probably am not going to go on for too long in this video. There isn't a great deal to talk about. There is, however, a semi-square between Mars and Pluto. This semi-square is potentially quite heavy duty. I mean, it can be about power and how we assert ourselves, and perhaps also about our fear of power. And at the end of this video, I'll be having a look at this aspect and what it might mean, and I'll have a few example charts. But anyway, let me get on with the astrology and the I Ching for today. So here is the chart for today, which is Thursday, November the 27th, 2025. Of course, as usual, this chart is set for New York at noon. Top right, we've got Mars and Pluto. Not a very imaginative visual, but just wanted to emphasize the point that this Mars semi-square Pluto is probably the main aspect of the day. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So as far as the chart is concerned, the moon is in late Aquarius at noon in New York, so it's getting ready to move into Pisces. And as far as when it moves into Pisces, well, London time this evening at 7:24 p.m. the moon moves into Pisces. So that does bring a bit of a change. When the moon moves into Pisces, we don't have any traditional planets in air signs. And we have the moon back in a water sign, and when the moon is in Pisces, it is in mutual reception with Jupiter, because the moon is in Pisces, which is Jupiter's sign. Jupiter is, of course, in Cancer, so there are certainly some advantages of the moon moving into Pisces. And if you're in the Americas, then late morning, early afternoon. Well, late morning if you're in California, for example, the moon will move into Pisces. Early afternoon if you're in New York. So that is an important changeover. Now, before the moon moves into Pisces, the moon is making a square to. Does make a square to Mercury and a square to Venus, probably sort of earlier in the day. And those two aspects. Oh, also a square to Uranus. The square to Uranus might be of some importance because when the moon makes a square to Uranus, it's also making a square to Venus. So we've kind of got a bit of a T-square going on with Venus opposition with Uranus on the T. I think that the moon will emphasize that Venus-Uranus opposition. And so if you've got Venus-Uranus opposition, well, what does that mean? It means perhaps something about relationships, how people get on with each other. I do understand that today, Thursday, is Thanksgiving. So if you're in the United States, well, happy Thanksgiving. But when it is Thanksgiving, I assume it can potentially be a day which is quite high pressure. That's often the case with holidays like Christmas and Thanksgiving. Families come together, and if there have been any sort of latent tensions, they can sort of come under the microscope. And with Venus opposition Uranus, that probably isn't great. Particularly, well, if you're in the Americas, that would be sort of earlier in the day. So if you're in the Americas, you could argue that you should kind of focus on the last part of the day. Wait for moon to move into Pisces before taking Thanksgiving seriously. An early Thanksgiving would not necessarily be a good Thanksgiving, but I think that the majority of people watching this video are not in the United States. I think just about, I think something like 40% of my viewers are in the United States, so 60% aren't. So Venus opposition Uranus, it can say something about relationships, how people get on with one another, and there might be a few disputes, personalities might clash, and the moon moving through late Aquarius might really bring that into focus, and it might all be intensified by the fact that Mars is making a semi-square to Uranus. So there's Mars at 16 Sagittarius making a, sorry, did I say Pluto? Mars is making a semi-square to Pluto. And Mars semi-square Pluto, can be about power. Who's got the power? Who hasn't got the power? Who's trying to get the power? And how do we assert ourselves? What do we keep secret? What do we reveal? And the question of boundaries, might be quite important with this Mars semi-square Pluto. Additionally, Mars at the moment is very close to true black moon Lilith. Now, when we're talking about black moon Lilith, you do have to remember that there is a difference between true black moon Lilith and mean black moon Lilith. I think I'll talk about black moon Lilith in greater detail at the end of the video when I talk about Mars semi-square Pluto, because it's kind of all part of the same thing. But with Mars conjunct true black moon Lilith, things can come to the surface, and there can be sort of anger in certain places. And what is one angry about? Well, if it's true black moon Lilith, it could be quite dark, and it could be about the past, and it could be about what people have done in the past. Perhaps people have been offended about something that happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago with true black moon Lilith. But Mars true black moon Lilith, it can be quite mean, I would have thought. It could be about things taking place that aren't always particularly pleasant. So that's a broad picture for New York as a representative of the Americas. And turning to Australia and New Zealand, here's a chart for Sydney. The moon does not go into Pisces today if you're in Australasia. The moon will be in Aquarius all day long, and so at noon Sydney time the moon is at 20 degrees Aquarius. So that moon square Venus square Uranus is probably going to be quite a feature of Australasia, not just square Venus and Uranus, but also Mercury. So you've got moon square Mercury, moon square Venus, moon square Uranus. So I think if you are in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, then you're perhaps going to feel that T-square more than if you're in the US. And it can be, as I've already said, about relationships, how people get on with each other, and it is in fixed signs, so there could be a certain amount of stubbornness there. And then we have the heliocentric view, so looking at things from the perspective of the sun. And let me just go back to that chart. Okay, sorry, just checking something. I had a terrible feeling that I'd got the date wrong. No, I've not got the date wrong. That's fine. Sorry. Okay, there's the... sorry about that. I shouldn't have doubted myself. There is the heliocentric chart. So, as far as what's going on, well, let's focus on the positives. The fact that Mercury is conjunct Jupiter. So, heliocentric conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter does indicate that, in spite of everything I've said, there is a potential for being positive and happy. And if you want a happy Thanksgiving, then try to think about the heliocentric energies there. Cut through the geocentric stuff and just remind yourself that there is a conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter. From the sun's perspective, Mercury and Jupiter are together. They're in the same place against the sort of a background of the stars. So Mercury and Jupiter can be pretty positive, especially as Venus is kind of connected as well. So you've got Venus at 12 degrees Scorpio, Mercury at 14 Cancer, so Mercury is moving away from the trine of Venus and moving towards the conjunction of Jupiter, and I think that that is, potentially a great aspect. The question is how much of it is able to filter down to sort of everyday life. That's always a question I have with heliocentric charts, because heliocentric charts, the heliocentric position of a planet is so impersonal. We don't have any houses in the heliocentric chart. We obviously we don't have a moon, or the moon is in the same place as the Earth. But if you can focus on the positive and ask yourself, where are things supposed to be going, and perhaps think about the new, think about sort of new ideas. And if you can talk about things which are exciting, and talk about your ideas, and also make sure to listen to other people's ideas. I think that might be the best way of dealing with today, because we've got Mercury trine Venus. Mercury trine Venus is not an aspect we have in a geocentric chart. You can't have Mercury trine Venus geocentrically, but you can certainly have it heliocentrically. And so this could be that conversation is smooth. Just try to avoid sort of heavily emotional content. Think about things in a more sort of general way, and you don't have to take things to a point. You don't have to get upset about things. And so I think there is very much a positive message in that heliocentric chart, if you can just get through it and not get sidetracked by trivia and people getting upset about things which in the grand scheme of things are very minor. And so now I want to move to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, November the 27th, 2025. Aries. Mars is your ruler, of course, and it's conjunct true black moon Lilith. I mean, it's been conjunct true black moon Lilith for a bit of time, and true black moon Lilith can be a problem. I mean, it's not really a very Aries energy, true black moon Lilith. And I should say, I keep saying true black moon Lilith because mean black moon Lilith is somewhere else. It's in late Scorpio, and I'm adamant that one should use true black moon Lilith and not mean black moon Lilith, because I just don't like the idea of just having to sort of average something out when the differences between the two are between true and mean are so high, because the true black moon Lilith it looks at the position as it is, and of course there's a lot of permutations and with the positions of true black moon Lilith. I mean, it can go all over the place, and at the moment black moon Lilith is half a sign away, almost kind of more than half a sign away from mean black moon Lilith. Just to show you what I mean, if we're interested in true black moon Lilith. I think I'll be talking about it again later in the video. But if you look at true black moon Lilith, there it is at 1713 Sagittarius. If we use mean black moon Lilith, it switches back into Scorpio. So a massive difference there. But I really do think one should use true black moon Lilith, and true black moon Lilith is conjunct Mars, and that may say something about you and the things that you have to be concerned about. You being concerned about things that maybe you just don't want to be concerned about. It might be that you're forced to get involved in the past and all the emotions that come with the past. So there's certainly a negativity there. On the other hand, true black moon Lilith, or black moon Lilith in general, is seen as being about one's power, the power that perhaps comes from the past, that comes from one's emotions and things that really run deep. And so don't be afraid of it. And as an Aries, you might not want to be bothered. You might want to just live in the present. But sometimes it's necessary to live in the past to some extent. I mean, we are defined by our past, and so that is a way of looking at true Black Moon Lilith. And additionally, you might have to be aware of your own unpleasantness. We're all unpleasant. We all can be unpleasant, and perhaps that's what true Black Moon Lilith is saying. You have to see yourself as a whole person. It's not just sweetness and light. And aside from that, the moon is changing sign. It's moving from sort of late Aquarius and from late Aquarius to Pisces. So when the moon moves into Pisces, Aries, it can be a time where you do want to slow down. It's not a bad time, but sometimes, you don't want to be really in the thick of things. And, that would have consequences. For example, if you are in the United States and you're talking about all this sort of Thanksgiving stuff, I don't know how seriously people take Thanksgiving in the United States. I think they take it very seriously, actually, in terms of, people moving from one side of the country to another because they have to celebrate Thanksgiving in I don't know. They're living in New York. They need to celebrate it in California, or vice versa. I don't know. It seems to be rather excessive, but still, bear in mind that as the day progresses, if you are in the United States, I think that you might want to slow down. And you might feel that you don't want to be in the center of things, and so bear that in mind. If you are planning on a active Thanksgiving, it just might not be what you want. You might be in the mood for peace and quiet, and that's the way it should be. Once the moon moves into Pisces, and it's not a bad time. With moon moving into Pisces, it's instead all about understanding where you function best. And as the moon moves into Pisces, I think you'll function best somewhere where you're not under pressure, where you're not in the center of things. And additionally, today, Aries, it is easy, or relatively easy, for you to get confused. You might not entirely understand what's going on, and you might feel that certain people are being deceptive. They're not being, entirely honest, and they're not necessarily being deliberately dishonest, but it may just be difficult to know what's going on. And that is another good reason why you should, increasingly, keep a low profile, certainly if you're in the Americas. Now, I wouldn't say that if you're in Australia or New Zealand. I think it's different in Australia and New Zealand. I think in Australia and New Zealand, you can afford, to be more active and enjoy other people's company and not feel that you have to hide anything. So, there is a bit of a difference there. Although the main aspect of the day, Aries, is Mars semisquare Pluto. And so whatever you're doing, Aries, wherever you are, the issue of power could be important. And you may be thinking about your power. Do you have the power? And what might constrain your power? And I think, Aries, if you were to be active socially over a prolonged period of time, then you might find yourself getting sidelined, or other people might have their own ideas, and you might be wondering where it's all going, and suddenly you might think, oh, this is no good, this is not where you want to go, this is not a direction you want to go in. And so with Mars semisquare Pluto, it's really telling you here to look after yourself and to make sure that you always have the power. And if you want to assert your power, whether or not the moon is in Aquarius or Pisces, then I certainly think you can. absolutely no doubt about that. Once you decide you have to put your foot down, then everyone is going to listen, and in the process you can probably be quite unpleasant if need be. I mean, after all, Mars is conjunct true black moon Lilith, so it's up to you how far you want to go. So Aries, I'm not saying that today's going to be straightforward. There may be times during the day when you feel that you are maybe losing control, but that would be unnecessary, because with that Mars semi-square Pluto, you definitely have the capacity to assert yourself. Taurus, there may be things that need to be finished. You need to get it out of the way, and reason for this is that we've got the moon making a square to Venus, and this moon square Venus, that's also making a moon is also making a square to Uranus, and this aspect reminds you of what needs to be done, what needs to be finished, and you're also aware of all the things that are in your way that are preventing you from seeing things through to a satisfactory completion. And yeah, it may be connected with other people. Other people could in certain situations be a real drain on your resources. They want your attention, they want you to do things their way, they expect you to behave in a certain way, and you don't necessarily always appreciate this. And besides, you've got things to do. You really feel that you've got to keep moving. You've got to be there, and if you're distracted, you might lose your moment. And so that might be an aspect of the day, particularly at the beginning of the day, particularly if you're in Australia and New Zealand. So what do? You certainly have to understand the impact that other people can have, and this is perhaps a feature of Venus being in Scorpio. Venus has been in Scorpio for some time. It's getting ready to move into Sagittarius. I think later in the week Venus will be in Sagittarius, but it's not quite there yet, and it's still in your opposite sign, and that means that you still feel constrained, and this constraint can be quite frustrating. You're thinking that you're having to spend too much time worrying about other people's needs, but try not to make a big thing about it. Give people something, but don't give people everything, and don't forget your core needs, what you have to do. And I do think there is something that you have to finish, and and if you were to sort of wait, it might be a question of sort of losing your moment. But then the moon does move into Pisces today. Certainly if you're in the United States or the Americas, the last part of the day the moon will be in Pisces, and from a perspective of enjoyment, that the moon moving into Pisces is a pretty good thing, because the moon in Pisces, from your perspective, Taurus, it's pretty sociable. You can interact with people very well, and at the same time, the moon is in mutual reception to Jupiter. So maybe that allows you to be the life and soul of the party. Okay, not quite the life and soul of the party, because the moon is in Pisces, Jupiter is in Cancer. These are sort of negative signs. It's not like we're dealing with fire signs here, but still you can keep things going, and you have a positivity to you that I think that people will appreciate, and it's important not to get sidetracked, not to allow things to become difficult, just keep it simple. I mean, everyone should really keep it simple today, especially as Mars is making a semi-square to Pluto. And, this Mars semi-square Pluto aspect, which I will be talking in some detail about later in the video, this aspect may say something about other people, how people are behaving, and it does seem that some people could be taking themselves rather too seriously. They may think that they need to be at the center of things, that they need to be the ones pulling the strings. But I don't think you should allow anyone to have too much power. That might just spoil the day. Especially as Mars is also conjunct true black moon Lilith. You don't want too many complications, but some people might be just a drag on things. They might be taking themselves too seriously. They might demand attention, and so be aware of that, and make sure that you just keep things on a fairly sort of light level. I don't think it's a day for being too serious. If you are too serious, then you could be losing your power. Too much seriousness, Taurus, is going to sort of change the focus of attention. It's away from you, it's on someone else, and you have to worry about someone else's emoting, and do you really want that? And I think the answer to that is probably no. But overall, Taurus, I think today should be okay. I think that today ideally should be a transition, perhaps starting the day taking things relatively seriously, particularly if you're doing anything to do with your work, or you've just got something you need to be doing. That's how it starts. But then as the day progresses, as the moon moves into Pisces, things do get easier, or at least they should get easier, and you should almost insist that things are easier. You really don't want to maintain that seriousness that might have been a feature of the beginning of the day. Gemini. I know that it is Thanksgiving in the United States, and the majority of you are not in the United States. But if you are in the United States, that could represent a pressure that you don't necessarily want. By that, I'm thinking that with the moon moving into Pisces, Gemini, you have your ambitions. There are things you want to achieve, and you want to take advantage of everything. And when the moon moves into Pisces, it's in mutual reception to Jupiter. That's a great mutual reception. I mean, remember, Pisces is a high-profile sign in your chart. It's about success and achievement. And so with moon moving into Pisces, there may be things that you just feel you want to do, you want to see through. And with moon in mutual reception to Jupiter, that's particularly powerful. So it might be a shame if you have to worry about whatever's going on with Thanksgiving and having to worry about family and all that kind of stuff. It might seem a distraction. And so, Gemini, if you really feel that something needs to be done today, if you're a Gemini in the United States, don't allow other people's pressure to sort of get in your way. Maybe that's just something you have to finish off. Maybe you have to make very good use of your time. And this should be regarded as a positive, by the way. Nothing wrong with it at all. And additionally, Gemini, you have a lot of energy at the moment, and it's important that you focus this energy in the right direction. I mean, you could, if you're not careful, just wasting this energy on other people, and you do things which are essentially very trivial, and you know that it's not the right thing to be doing. You'd rather be doing something else. So if you do have this energy, and you really feel energized, then make sure that you focus it on something that is useful, something that you want to do. Because what you don't want to happen, Gemini, is to just feel frustrated. You feel that there were things that you could be doing, but you're not doing, and it just seems to be, a real shame. And so if you're not careful today, Gemini, there just could be a sense of a wasted opportunity. And you might blame other people for wasting the opportunity. You had to do things their way, and it was all a terrible shame. But I don't want to be negative. There's really no need to be negative. I'm really confident that today you can really make things happen, and you can create a situation where you're the one who benefits. And so you just have to be tough. And if you want to enjoy yourself, wait until you have got whatever needs to be got out of the way. Wait until that is out of the way. And I think that is the right approach. As far as relationships are concerned, well, Mars is making a semisquare to Pluto. I mean, Mars semisquare Pluto is the main aspect of the day. And of course, Mars is moving through Sagittarius. It's your opposite sign. It's making a conjunction to true black moon Lilith. And so, certain people could be a problem. I'm not saying they will be a problem, but they could be a problem. They might want a lot of your time and energy. They might be taking themselves very seriously, and they might insist that you take them seriously. And Gemini, that's not necessarily what you want to do. And so perhaps you shouldn't be giving people a chance. So maybe think ahead. Think about what you are doing today, who you are meeting, who you are spending your time with, or rather who you could spend your time with. And then be selective. If someone has been difficult in the past, then it's very likely that they're going to be difficult in the present and the future. And that's the way it is. People don't change. And so choose carefully. Choose your company carefully. And if in doubt, stay out of someone's way. I think that is the right approach. And also, do think about what is important to you, because right now, Gemini, your ambitions do matter. Cancer. The day probably starts off, I won't say slowly, but I'll say in a way that it will start off in a way where you are somewhat unsure of yourself. You're not quite sure what you're supposed to be doing, and you can come up with all sorts of reasons why things might not be perfect, and you're not going to just want to completely let go, and that's going to be your approach. And there could indeed be things that you have to bother with. Maybe other people are going to be a bother. It could be that you just have doubts about whether something is wise. And you can certainly see the potential. You can see all the great things you could be doing. But do you really want to get involved? And so a cautious approach to begin with, I think, would be advisable. And if you're in Australia and New Zealand, maybe you should have a cautious approach all day long. I mean, if you're in Australia and New Zealand, the moon is in Aquarius throughout the day, and it's making a square to Uranus, and so with that square, square to Uranus, some people could be problematic, and they might not be reliable. And you're trying to do what you love, but even then it's difficult. So ideally, Cancer, you would not create a situation for yourself where you could be let down. And if you feel cautious, then I think that is the right approach. But then the moon moves into Pisces. So, moon moving into Pisces, well, if you're in California or British Columbia, that will be sort of late morning in the East Coast, New York, it would be early afternoon. In Europe, it would be early evening. But whenever the moon does move into Pisces, I do think that there will be an improvement. Perhaps quite a rapid improvement. Moon, in Aquarius, is under pressure. It's square Uranus, but when it moves into Pisces, the moon is in mutual reception to Jupiter by sign, and so that's very fortunate. And also moon in Pisces. It's a water sign. You're feeling good about yourself, and also you can see possibilities. So, at the beginning of the day, you might see that there are no possibilities, or think that there are no possibilities. But when the moon changes sign, things start to open up, and you can sort of contemplate variety and not being worried about change. So, Cancer, the day does get better as it goes along. And so you shouldn't assume, when you get out of bed, that it's going to stay like that. Things are definitely going to improve. And so, don't give up. Don't think that it's all a waste of time. Don't think that you won't be appreciated, or that you haven't got opportunities, or you're being frustrated. That's not the way it's going to end up. And so be prepared to sort of see it through, and give people a chance. To begin with, some people might just seem really hopeless and unsupportive, and they might not seem to have much energy. But things do very much change, and it's not just your environment changing; it's you changing. I think that to begin with, you're going to find it difficult to be positive and enthusiastic, but by the end of the day, you find your groove, and so it really is worth sticking with it. And if you're in the United States, then I think that Thanksgiving should be fine, provided you don't celebrate Thanksgiving too early. But I don't know when people celebrate Thanksgiving in the United States, what the key moment is. I mean, it's not a precise moment, but I think it can be quite a fun day, wherever you are. Unless you're in Australia or New Zealand. If you're in or East Asia, then that is different, because the moon does not move into Pisces until tomorrow, Friday. Leo, if you look at what's going on astrologically, you will see that the sun is still on the Venus-Mars midpoint. And that matters, of course, because the sun is your ruler. So looking at the sun, there's the sun in Sagittarius, and it's on either. It's got Venus and Mars, on either side of it. So there's the sun in Sagittarius. You can see that it's approximately 9 minutes from Venus, and around 9 degrees from Venus and 11 degrees from Mars. So the sun still on the Venus-Mars midpoint. And this is a midpoint that's important because it's direct, and it also represents two wide conjunctions. The sun is conjunct Venus, it's conjunct Mars, very wide conjunctions. But because the sun is exactly on the midpoint, these two conjunctions come into action, and they make themselves felt. And with this aspect, you're able to be quite charming. People are interested in you. People will like you. People will gravitate towards you. And so, don't hide your light under a bushel. You really can, be yourself, and whatever you do, you're likely to get favorable attention. And so, don't give up on other people, and don't underestimate the impact you are having. Although that doesn't mean to say that you want to be totally sociable, all day long. I mean, the moon moon starts the day in Aquarius. It does start, so that starts today in your opposite sign, and with the moon moving through Aquarius, other people do matter to an extent, but other people can seem at times irritating. I mean, the moon in Aquarius is, it's making a square to Venus, it's making a square to Uranus, and so things might not appear to be too smooth. And why would that be the case? Well, it might be the case because you're inclined to take other people too seriously. You might be very charming, and you might have the ability to be assertive, but you might not want to use that power, and instead you could find yourself being pulled this way and that, having to worry about outside pressures, what other people want, what they don't want, and that would not really be the right approach. And as the day progresses, as the moon moves into Pisces, things do change. When moon moves into Pisces, it's a time, Leo, when I think that you will start taking yourself more seriously. You're less prepared to give in to other people's demands, and you're starting to think about what you want. And if you're very sure that you know what you want, then everything becomes very straightforward, because right now, Leo, you're able to project yourself, because of that sun remaining on the Venus-Mars midpoint. You're able to project yourself as an attractive and charismatic person who should get their way, and I think that certainly is the case. And in order to get your way, you have to have some awareness of the emotional dynamics. There are a lot of things going on emotionally, and you can see them, but just because things are happening emotionally doesn't mean it's a bad thing. I think actually it could be quite a good thing, because Leo, you're going to have a good awareness of the emotional dynamics, and it may even be an uncharacteristic awareness. I mean, Leo is not known to be an especially emotional sign, but your understanding of what's going on emotionally right now is going to be good. And if need be, Leo, I think that you should be able to sort of manipulate the situation so that it runs in your favor. Virgo, the day doesn't necessarily start as how it ends. I think at the beginning of the day, Virgo, it may seem that there are just things that you have to attend to. And I'm not just talking about things from an American perspective. I mean, it might be easy to say that if you're an American and you take Thanksgiving seriously, then there are things to attend to. If you're the kind of person that celebrates Thanksgiving, and so you could say that's an easy shot on my part. You can say that, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're in the United States, wherever you are. It just feels that certain things need to be done, and it's not always easy. The moon is making a square to Mercury, right at the beginning of the day, and that moon square Mercury could just be an irritant. Things you just don't want to do, but you have to do it anyway. And that might mean that on your part there's a certain resentment, especially if other people aren't pulling their weight, and then the moon the moon moves on, makes a square to Venus, makes a square to Uranus, and those two aspects could be annoying. And where is the annoyance? It's not necessarily that other people are behaving badly. It may not be about other people, although it could be easier to put the blame on someone else if things aren't going your way, if you feel frustrated. But I think it's a question, Virgo, of being honest, not necessarily projecting your own worries onto other people, and if need be, just doing things your way. And perhaps if you are alone, it's just going to be easier to get things done. Now, the moon does change sign; it moves into Pisces. So, moon changing into Pisces, that does make it easier for you, because when the moon moves into Pisces, you're going to become more comfortable, perhaps less resentful, and you're going to find it easier to understand people and not get annoyed by their behavior, even their selfishness. Some people are selfish. Just because someone is selfish doesn't mean that they should be struck out of your life. I mean, everyone can appear selfish in certain situations, and I think with the moon moving into Pisces, remember, when the moon moves into Pisces, it's in mutual reception to Jupiter, because moon is in a sign ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter's in a sign ruled by the moon. So when you've got moon mutual reception to Pisces, that really would indicate that you have the capacity to get on with people, and you can get on with people without having to do anything. It's just a static situation where everyone can just understand one another. So that does bode well for relationships. It also bodes well for your social life and how people are interacting. So I think that the day is likely to improve, and it will continuously improve. So things seem difficult to begin with. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to sort of continue like that. Now, the main aspect of the day, I regard as being the most important aspect of the day, is a semisquare between Mars and Pluto. And this Mars-Pluto aspect might encourage you to be defensive. I don't think you have to be defensive, but you could be defensive. I talked about sort of resentment, and resentment might be one way of describing Mars square Pluto. Just being resentful if you are not being taken seriously, if you find that everything is down to you, and you might also resent intrusion, people messing up your life, getting in your way, perhaps demanding your time and your effort. And with Mars semi-square Pluto, in some respects you would prefer to just do things your way and not have to go anywhere, not to have to do anything. And it just could be, even when the moon is in Pisces, that might encourage you to think that where there are people, there's just extra work. And that could be a theme of today. I'm not saying it is going to be a theme. I think in general, when the moon moves into Pisces, you're going to be quite sort of easygoing, and I think that you certainly have the capacity to get on very well with everyone. But Mars semi-square Pluto does give us another possibility that maybe you shouldn't think too much about it. If you allow yourself to be resentful, you certainly can be resentful, but maybe you shouldn't. And with the moon in Pisces, that is the way forward, because when the moon moves into Pisces, it starts making a conjunction to the North Node. So the path for you is to be accepting, take people as they are, not to get too offended, and remember that to an extent Virgo is a service sign, and I don't want to exaggerate that, because as a Virgo, you don't want to martyr yourself. You don't want to just completely put yourself out for others. That's absolutely not what you want to do. But at the same time, thinking about things in terms of service and what you can do for other people, it's not such a bad thing. And it may be that if you are helping someone, listening to them, yeah, it might seem at one level a bit of a waste of time, but if you look at it on a sort of a higher level, it's right. It's right that you have made some effort to improve someone's day, to make someone feel good about themselves. But yeah, you don't need to martyr yourself, though. Libra. Mars is semisquare Pluto, and that is an important aspect, and it could be an aspect that has quite a powerful influence on the day. So if we think about Mars semisquare Pluto, that might say something about other people's behavior and how you perceive other people's behavior. I mean, Mars, after all, is ruler of Aries, which is your opposite sign. And so with Mars semisquare Pluto, it might seem that not everyone is being reasonable, and they might want attention, but it may go further than that. They might also want to assert their power, and in the process of asserting their power, be taken seriously. And so how far do you want to go with this? I think, Libra, you need to perhaps take certain people with a pinch of salt. Just because someone wants to be taken seriously, wants to be the center of attention, wants to be the one with the power, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to listen to them. You can give them some attention, but you don't have to give anyone too much attention. And instead, Libra, think about what you would like to be doing. And at the moment, Libra, there are things you can do which are really quite clever, and which are fundamentally connected with who you are. They are sort of a natural expression of your many talents, and you express it all very well. And if you give yourself the chance, what you don't want to happen is to be distracted halfway through. So you're involved in doing something that is important to you, and someone thinks that you should be listening to them or dropping everything you're doing to focus on something else. Yeah, and that would not be desirable. So perhaps you do need to be very clear about what you're doing today, and the key thing is that you do what you're best at. You let other people do what they're best at, and at the same time you tune into your own talents, and I think that you can do that very well. And once you get some positive feedback, you realize that you are being clever, you're being appreciated for being clever, then things really do start to move. So I think, Libra, you need to be firm there. You should not be giving up everything because someone else wants attention. That would be a waste of time. It would be undesirable, and on your part, it might take some organization. You need to make sure that you're in an environment where you can be seen in the best possible light, and not just seen, but you can actually give yourself a chance to really, demonstrate, your many talents, because they are very real. And when the moon moves into Pisces, okay, it might not move into Pisces until tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but if you're in Europe or the Americas, particularly the Americas, the moon will move into Pisces. And when the moon moves into Pisces, it makes a mutual reception to Jupiter. And so this perhaps gives you a chance to really concentrate on the things that matter to you, and your ability to organize things is going to be good. And the question is, what do you have to organize? It may be that you just have to organize yourself. You have to create for yourself, the best possible environment, somewhere where you feel comfortable, and also where you can do something of real quality, and that goes back to your talents and what you're good at. And it's not a day for doing something you might be somewhat good at, but there's always someone that can do it better than you. It's not that kind of day. You need to perhaps pursue excellence. You can be excellent in certain areas. In other areas, it's just okay. And so some degree of focus, Libra, I think today could be important, because you don't want to waste the opportunities. And when we're talking about fate and free will, it could just be a day which is a bit of a nothing, where nothing happens, where there might have been opportunities but they don't come together. It could be that kind of day, but it needn't be that kind of day. And it just might be about the pursuit of excellence, where you are excellent, just concentrating on what you're good at. And if you can do that, then I think that you can really turn things round. Scorpio. Mars is your ruler. There's a lot of focus on Mars at the moment, because Mars is semisquare Pluto, and Mars is also conjunct true black moon Lilith. And when we think about true black moon Lilith, we think about things which are of the night and which are not necessarily seen, but they are nonetheless very real, even if they do occupy the shadows. And with this aspect, particularly as we've got Mars conjunct true black moon Lilith, and also Mars semisquare Pluto, there is something really quite serious about that. And it might also seem somewhat scary to some people, but not to a Scorpio. I mean, you're dealing with energies that I think that fundamentally you understand extremely well, and you know what is possible, and I don't think that you're afraid. And so perhaps, Scorpio, you should be thinking about how you can make the most of it all. If you're able to go in places that other people can't, then that gives you a distinct advantage. And it's possible that you can be quite manipulative, if need be, and you have a good understanding of other people's weaknesses, and also perhaps their fears. And so if you are in the business of persuasion, perhaps selling things, then I think that your abilities will be very good. You'll be able to use words, very carefully but very effectively. I mean, that's Scorpio. So Scorpio, if you're not happy with the way things are going, if you want to change the situation, then you certainly can, because you will know what levers to pull, what strings to pull, what levers to press, what strings to pull. You'll know how to sort it all out. And this could help you in many areas. Don't forget money. There could be a financial aspect to all of this. So if you are involved with money today, then you can be quite effective. You'll know what to say. You'll know who to ask. So money may be available, or at least you can create a situation where you may, in the not so distant future, be able to benefit financially. But also money could be slightly obsessive with Mars conjunct true black moon Lilith and the semisquare to Pluto. There is the question: who has the money? Do they deserve to have the money? Is it your money? Is something owed to you? And so these are the kind of things you're thinking about, and it's possible that you have a grudge. You feel that you've been treated unfairly, but if you feel you've been treated unfairly, then I'm relatively confident that you can do something about it. You can impose your will, and if you're prepared to impose your will today, then you can get what you're looking for. And it's not just about money. I think with Mars semi-square Pluto, you are powerful, and if you need to use that power, then by all means go ahead. Though you should not be just throwing around power just for the sake of it. I mean, that's not going to be very useful. And generally, as the day progresses, Scorpio, probably things get easier. Things become sort of more straightforward, and part of that is because the moon is leaving Aquarius and moving into Pisces. And when the moon moves into Pisces, you feel better. You feel more in your element, and you understand what's happening, and most importantly, you know how to enjoy yourself. So enjoyment can be part of today's experience when the moon moves into Pisces. And the moon is in mutual reception to Jupiter, and so you shouldn't limit yourself. And perhaps that's an important key to enjoyment. If you try to enjoy yourself in the same old ways, or if you try to be very traditional about it, you think that the old ways of enjoying yourself are the best ways, well, then you might be disappointed. And of course, that might relate to Thanksgiving. I know that if you're in the United States, there might be Thanksgiving, and probably there's this view that the aim is to enjoy oneself, and Thanksgiving is all about some kind of tradition, or it just might be a fantasy of what the past was like. But if you try to recreate the past in precise detail, then you might be disappointed. But that can't be a thing that Scorpios can do, because Scorpios are a fixed sign, and so they like things to be fairly unchanging very often. Not always. I mean, there is, of course, the scorpionic side of the water signs, and Scorpio is about transformation and being able to deal with transformation, but there's just some possibility that you're too focused on doing things in the same old ways, and the same old ways, they might have worked last year, but they're not going to work anymore. And so there's no harm in trying to be transformative, not being stuck in the past. You can be aware of the past, but in order to enjoy the present, something might have to change, and something perhaps has to change in quite a radical way. Sagittarius. There is, of course, a lot going on in Sagittarius still. We've still got the Sun, Mars, and true black moon Lilith in this sign. And Mars is making a conjunction to true black moon Lilith. It's also making a semi-square to Pluto. And this Mars conjunct true black moon Lilith could be quite extreme. Especially as you link it with the semi-square to Pluto, and being a Sagittarius, you might feel that you have to do something. You're looking for something different, and it might be that anything that is different is worthy of your attention. And so, Sagittarius, you could find yourself going all over the place and thinking that you should be free, that you deserve to be free. And that's great. I mean, it's always good to be a Sagittarian. But if you give yourself free rein, then in the end, you might get yourself into areas that you hadn't really anticipated. And suddenly things could get unexpectedly complicated when they shouldn't be. I mean, that's the way you see it. You're trying to keep it simple, and you're just trying to just be a Sagittarius. But even then, things might not entirely work out as expected, and perhaps Sagittarius today, you need to have a few limitations. You can't be everywhere, and it might eventually occur to you that you don't have to go anywhere. You can be comfortable just where you are, and when you're just when you're with yourself, when you're with people you know and trust, that's enough. And so exploration seems to be the right approach. It's what the average Sagittarius wants, but I just don't think that right now it would work in a way that is at all satisfactory. And if you stick to what you know and trust, then you're going to feel happy, because you might realize that that is all you need. You've got enough on your plate as it is, and so to take on new material, new adventures, I don't think that's going to work. Especially once the moon moves into Pisces, because when the moon moves into Pisces, it does make a mutual reception to Jupiter. So that's great, that you've got the moon Jupiter mutual reception. But if you want to make the most of the energy of that mutual reception, because moon and Jupiter are in each other's signs, then you're going to have to be in a relatively safe and secure environment. If you're having to deal with new people, new environments today, increasingly you're not going to feel comfortable. I don't think you'll even feel excited. You'll just feel perhaps out of your element. So whatever you're doing today, I would advise you to keep it simple. And if you're feeling adventurous, well, I think the adventures can wait. I think that right now you perhaps need to explore what you've got, and it's not necessarily as simple as it seems. And so don't be distracted by the desire for the novel and the new. No, not at all. But just be comfortable with other people. You can get on well with other people right now. I mean, it's not going to be a problem, and whoever they are, but a bit of familiarity would be useful. If you're in an unfamiliar situation, I just don't see how you can really perform on all cylinders. I think you're just going to feel that something is constraining you. So if it's familiar, then probably it's going to be fine. If it feels alien and unusual, and you have to ask lots of questions about something, then that might be a sign that you should probably avoid it. Capricorn. I think Capricorn, you're sustained by the grand trine in water signs. So this grand trine involves Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn. I've already talked about it at some length, but it's still there, very much there, and it works for you. because if you look at this grand trine and what it's doing, it does involve Saturn, and so here's Saturn in Pisces, and Saturn remains on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, and so with Saturn on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, you benefit from the pairing of the two benefics. So Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics, and together they're very lucky. And I think that this maintains your luck. And so if something can work well, then there's no reason why it shouldn't work well. Things can really move, and if you take a positive approach and you think about all the ways in which things could work, then I think they definitely can work. And so I think that there is this underlying optimism. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you're necessarily going to benefit from it, because you might want to look the other way. You might not want to be positive. I am not someone who encourages positivity just for the sake of it. I'm deeply suspicious of the concept of positive thinking. But I think in this situation, Capricorn, I think that you should try to think about the best possible results, how things really could work for you, because I think they can work for you, and you have to, in a way, decide that they're going to work for you. You almost have to decide, are you going to be positive or are you going to be negative? And with the average Capricorn, there often is a negative streak. The Capricorns can be very down to earth, and they don't like to drift off in sort of clouds of fantasy. I'm not suggesting that you do have fantasies about how wonderful things could be, but if you put in the effort and you try to be positive, then I think that things really can work for you. And I think this is particularly the case later in the day. I mean, the day starts off with the moon in Aquarius, and perhaps with the moon in Aquarius, you might find that there are things bothering you, things that you feel you need to attend to, and if your thoughts drift to the subject of money, for example, you might kind of get stuck on it, especially as the moon is square Uranus. That moon square Uranus aspect could be a bit obsessive. Once you've decided that something is important, you just keep going. But then the moon moves into Pisces, and straight away just things get easier. The moon doesn't really do anything immediately when it moves into Pisces, but it does move into a mutual reception with Jupiter, and so moon moving into Pisces, straight away you become more positive, and also you probably become a nicer person, someone who just finds it easy to be social and to be pleasant, and so it's easier to make the most of other people's company. And so I think, Capricorn, you can make it a good day. And part of it is your own effort, but another part might be just waiting for the moon to move into Pisces to make that mutual reception to Jupiter, especially from a social perspective. Now, if you are in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, okay, the moon does not move into Pisces until tomorrow. But I maintain what I said about that grand trine. That grand trine is not going anywhere, so you still can benefit from Saturn being on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. But as far as the moon going into Pisces is concerned, well, that's something to look forward to tomorrow on Friday, if you are in Australia, New Zealand, or East Asia. But if you're in the Americas, if you're in the United States, certainly I think that it's definitely a case of the day just constantly improving. And so Yeah, do have a pleasant day. Aquarius. I was mentioning to Capricorn just now that you know that Capricorns do need to be positive. They need to look at things in the best possible light, and I give you the same message. And very simply, it's because we've got this grand trine in water signs still. Saturn is on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. Saturn is a ruler of Capricorn. Saturn is also the ruler of Aquarius. So, as I was saying to Capricorn, I think that it's a good idea to be positive. You can be positive. I think that things can work for you. The question then is, how are they going to work for you? In what way? And there could very well, Aquarius, be a material side to it. Thinking about your ambitions, perhaps your money as well. What can you do to improve things? And I think that you very much can take action to improve your material situation. Okay, it starts with a positive thought and a belief in yourself and a belief that you can get what you want. And then, of course, it has to manifest in terms of action. And the question is, where is the scope for action? I mean, that does, to an extent, depend on your situation. So, for example, United States, Thanksgiving, maybe it's not a great time to be pursuing a career and financial interest, but there's always a possibility. But this grand trine is not going to just break up immediately. This grand trine will continue for the next day or two, and perhaps you should be thinking about how you would like things to develop and what you'd like to gain. Yeah, in a financial sense, material sense, and not just money and things, but there is evidence that this is nonetheless an area where you can be successful. And additionally, we've got the moon moving out of Aquarius and into Pisces. And so when you think about that moon moving out of Aquarius into Pisces, you might feel that that's a shame. I mean, it's good to have the moon in Aquarius. Well, it is. And it's also good for the moon to be in Pisces. But as far as the moon in Aquarius is concerned, I mean, particularly relevant if you're in Australia or New Zealand, because if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon will be in Aquarius all day. But if you're in Europe, it'll be in Aquarius for most of the day. And even in the Americas, the first part of the day, you've got the moon in Aquarius. So when the moon is in Aquarius, it makes a T square. So you've got moon making a square to Venus, it's making a square to Uranus, and that is a very dynamic aspect, and it brings together Venus and Uranus. So you have the possibility there of creating effects. You know what kind of effects you'd like to make. You know what kind of influence you'd like to have, and I think that you can make it happen. And it's all about you. It's all about you presenting yourself to the world as you are. You don't have to pretend to be anyone. I mean, Aquarians hate pretending anyway. But if you show yourself to be a real, individual, then inevitably people are going to notice. And this might be a way of unlocking things. Sometimes people don't want to be themselves. They try to be someone else. They're afraid that if they're someone else, they might get a negative reaction. But this is, absolutely not the case. People want individuality. They don't want people pretending to be someone they're not. And as an Aquarius, you're very capable of being genuine. And with your genuineness, you can really make things happen, and you can force people to listen to you. And in the process, there's just something about you that is different, that is is charismatic, is attractive. People notice you. They might not feel entirely comfortable with you, but that's all part of the thing, isn't it? If people are comfortable with you, well, they take you for granted and they can kind of ignore you. But if you put people on edge ever so slightly, that can certainly help. It can help in terms of getting their attention. And if there's anything you want, well, there's a good chance they're going to give it to you, because that's, for them, is the easiest approach. Pisces. The moon does go into Pisces today. Okay, it might does go into Pisces tomorrow if you're in East Asia or Australia or New Zealand, but for most of us, the moon will at some stage go into Pisces. It might be this evening if you're in Europe. It might be late morning if you're in California. But, with the moon moving into your sign, that is obviously, good news. Especially as the moon is in mutual reception to Jupiter. So if you start the day feeling that you can't do anything, that you can't have any impact, then you're looking at things from a sort of moon and Aquarius perspective, and you just feel that's the way it is. But if you just keep going, you wait for the moon to move into Pisces, then you start to experience a change. You become more sociable, and you become more focused, and you just generally get a better sense of who you are and what you can achieve. And I really do think that at the moment you can achieve a considerable amount, and you are ambitious. And Mars is still conjunct true black moon Lilith. It's also making a semi-square to Pluto. Now, Mars conjunct true black moon Lilith and semi-square Pluto might sound a problem, but I don't think it is a problem. It gives you dynamism. It gives you desire. I mean, desire is necessary. I mean, if you don't have that sort of raw desire, what can you achieve? You don't have the motivation, but I think that you do have the motivation to be successful, to make a mark. And it doesn't matter where you are. Even if it's you're in the United States and you've got Thanksgiving and you're distracted by friends and family, even then you don't forget your desires, Pisces, and you are thinking about what you would like to do, what you would like to achieve, how you want to get it. And you don't, in most cases, have to use brute force. You don't have to be aggressive, because at the moment I think that your social abilities are pretty good. You can get on with most people, and you will know how to behave, but you will also understand how to safeguard your own vital interests. So I do think that things are looking good. And as far as Mars conjunct true black moon Lilith is concerned, that might mean that you can be tough. You can be tough with yourself, and you can be tough with other people if necessary. But as I've already suggested, I don't think it is necessary. I think that people in general will be inclined to do things your way, and I don't think that they'll need much in the way of prompting. But you still have those desires, and perhaps we can see true black moon Lilith as being about desires that you're not always very open about, but they exist, and they might exist in the darkness, but they're there, and these desires could sort of propel you to sort of fresh heights, to fresh glories. Yes, it could happen. So Pisces, don't underestimate your own power. And I do think that, as the day continues, you will become increasingly powerful. And so you have to think about how you're going to use this power, and what it is that you're trying to achieve. And that's it with the 12 signs. And it's now time to switch to the I Ching. So I asked the question, What is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 5, which at first sight seems pretty harmless. It's waiting. We're waiting for something to happen. We know it has to happen in the end. We can't wait forever. I think that is a key point about this hexagram. It might seem passive, but at some stage we've got to take the initiative. We perhaps have got to take the risk, but we don't want to do it right now. And many of us may just be holding back, for whatever reason. It could be, for example, today, Thursday, in the United States is Thanksgiving, so maybe people don't want to do much, or they certainly don't want to take huge and dangerous initiatives. But we all know that in the end, something does have to happen, and we have 2 moving lines. So you can see with this hexagram that you have got a bottom trigram, which is 3 unbroken lines. Then the top trigram is the abyss, and the 4th and the 6th line moves. And so the 4th line moving is surprisingly dangerous. The I Ching is talking about a situation that you need to rapidly be aware of. And the Wilhelm translation says something like waiting covered in blood. That's not a great position to be waiting in. And it's like saying, you got to act now. If you don't act now, well, it's going to get bad. You should have already acted. But there seems to be a certain urgency here. But I just must remind you, this is a reading for just one day. It's just a Thursday. Logically, it only applies until the end of the day. So you don't get too worried about it. But maybe there's something that is not entirely satisfactory, and you've just paused, and you're just not sure which way to go. And I don't know whether you feel like that at the moment. But at some stage, you've got to do something. Because if you don't do something, things are not going to get any better. Action is definitely required there. And then the 6th line moves. And the 6th line, I think we had this line quite recently, and it's like falling into a pit, and that's the bad side of falling into a pit. But 3 uninvited guests turn up, and these 3 guests, at first we might regard them as being an enemy, as people we don't want to have anything to do with. But in fact, they could work in our favor, and these 3 people are encouraging us to do something. And that is another theme of this top line. We haven't done anything, and outside forces are saying to get yourself together, do something, make a decision, move. And so there is real pressure there. If you're talking about 3 guests, I do understand that in America it's Thanksgiving, so that may say something about Thanksgiving and people turning up who were unexpected and perhaps having a negative view to guests. And this negative view is not necessarily justified. It may turn out that people who you thought were hostile may actually be your friends. They might do something in your favor. So the overall view is that something has to happen, and you're dragging your feet. And then waiting, 2 lines moving, we move to a second hexagram, and we move to hexagram number 1, which is the creative. So in the end, we realize we have to do something, and we act. And that's what the creative is about. But it's action where we don't necessarily say what we're trying to achieve. We're not clear about it, because the creative doesn't like to be defined. It is the dragon, and so the dragon has woken, and the dragon is asking us to, or telling us even, that there is something that we absolutely need to get going on, and it can't wait. And it's like the action is really more important than our conscious aim, because our conscious aim, well, we think about logic and we're trying to achieve something, but that's not really what it's about. It's action, making something, starting something. It's that first spark. And, with that first spark, there are many possibilities, maybe infinite possibilities with that first spark. And that's what we have to do, create that first spark, and then we have to see what happens. But the thing is that we've got to constantly be moving. It's not a day for just staying still. Whichever hexagram you look at, and certainly in the previous hexagram, waiting, we absolutely should not be waiting covered in blood. That's not how it should be. We need to realize what needs to be done, and decisiveness is important. And it may, in certain situations, be the case that decisiveness is required in order to avoid some kind of disaster. But we have to again remember it's just a hexagram for just one day, so maybe it's not a disaster, but decisiveness can help us avoid some kind of a mishap. And once we have made that decision, then we have to sort of proceed and ask ourselves, what is it that we're trying to start? Where is that first spark? And we shouldn't try to constrain that first spark by having ideas about how it should develop. We have to just allow things to work out in their own way. But for ourselves, well, we have to be constructive and positive, and not wait. Waiting is it would seem is a bad choice today. And finally, I want to look at the semisquare between Mars and Pluto today. I'm not going to spend very long on it. So here is the chart for today. You can see that Mars is at 16 degrees 50 Sagittarius. Pluto is at 1 degree 50 Aquarius. So Mars and Pluto are 45 degrees apart. And as I said in the introduction, Mars square Pluto, Mars semi-square Pluto can be about power, who has the power, who doesn't have the power. It can be about a battle for control. It can also be quite obsessive, obsessively wanting everything to be right. And it's an aspect that, when we see it, Mars semi-square Pluto, well, you might say, 45-degree aspect, that's quite minor. But if you've been looking at my videos, you'll know I regard the semi-squares as being quite important. And a semi-square 45-degree aspect is functionally the same as a sesquiquadrate, which is an 135-degree aspect. So this Mars semi-square Pluto may say something about today and what people are doing. People are trying to be in control. They want to have influence, and also we're very aware of who is trying to push us around. That can be what the Mars semi-square Pluto aspect is about. And it can also be about concentrated control, really feeling that we have to focus on getting our way. Now, the Mars semi-square Pluto this time round is tied up with true black moon Lilith. Now, when it comes to true black moon Lilith, I must make it clear that you've got mean black moon Lilith, and you've got true black moon Lilith, and the difference between the two can be substantial. It's not like the true and the mean nodes where you've got a maximum of about a degree between the two. This is a big difference. And so do you take the mean, where you just average through its motion, or do you go for something which is more precise? I have to say that you have to go for the true black moon Lilith, because if the mean node, the mean true black moon Lilith, you're looking very often at precise aspects. Can you really look at a precise aspect when you are using a mean position. I don't think you can, especially as the difference between the mean and a true black moon Lilith is so substantial. I mean, to illustrate the difference, here is true black moon Lilith at 1712 Sagittarius. If we switch that to mean black moon Lilith, it shifts back into Scorpio. So 70, that's about a 20-degree difference between the two. So it does really make a difference. Really matters which one you go for. And as far as I'm concerned, I go for the true black moon Lilith, which is at around 17 Sagittarius, and it is conjunct Mars. And so with Mars conjunct true black moon Lilith and Mars semi-square Pluto, there is just something today that could be quite intense. It is about power, how we are using power, how we are throwing that power away. And yeah, we can throw our power away. That is possible. We might find that our power is just too much for us. That's something we need to consider. And Mars on the conjunct true black moon Lilith, I'm afraid could be something quite unpleasant about it. It's not nice. It's the way people get angry, the way they assert themselves. That might not impact us as ordinary individual human beings, but when we look at what's happening in the world, what people are trying to achieve, people are trying to really force things through, and they don't necessarily care what they have to do in order to get their way. So, overall, it could be quite a high pressure day because of its Mars semi-square Pluto, especially on a global level, maybe not so much on an individual level. Now, as far as the 90-degree dial is concerned, let's have a different perspective on this. The 90-degree dial doesn't show true black moon Lilith, I'm afraid, but so, there is Mars. We'll put that on the dial. So when you've got a semi-square or a sesquiquadrate, straight away you have an opposition on the 90-degree dial. So there is Mars and Pluto opposition one another, and you can see the midpoints. One midpoint that stands out is the Sun-Neptune midpoint. So with Mars semi-square Pluto, Mars and Pluto on the Sun on the Sun-Neptune midpoint, there is a danger there of misapplied energy. We want something to happen. We try to get our way, but we get it wrong. We don't necessarily think it through, or perhaps it's based on fantasy. We think we can get our way. We think we're holding all the cards, but maybe we're not. And so if you are planning on taking any big initiatives today, then think about what you're doing. And especially if power is involved, you might think you're being very clever, very powerful, but it could all get sort of watered down, and we might achieve next to nothing. Okay, it might not be us, it might be someone else. So those that try to assert themselves strongly, they might slip up. And so if you come across angry people, well, you might want to watch how it all ends up, but maybe you don't want to watch. Maybe you don't want to be around. And finally, I did say it was going to be a short video, relatively short video. Finally, just a couple of people who have Mars semi-square or Mars sesquiquadrate Pluto in their charts, because Mars, semi-square and a sesquiquadrate are functionally the same. And so Al Capone, for example, the most famous gangster of them all, probably involved in the St. Valentine's Day massacre, who I think he died of syphilis in prison in the end, but he had Mars semi-square Pluto. We don't know how exact, because I don't have a time of birth for him, but there's his there's his Mars at 29 Cancer, semisquare Pluto. So for Al Capone, as a gangster, power and the exercise of power was certainly very important to him. And another person who has got Mars semisquare Pluto is, or was, Brian Thompson. I don't have a time of birth for Brian Thompson. So if you remember, Brian Thompson was the CEO of a health insurance company. It was United Healthcare, and he was gunned down in New York very early in the morning. I think someone has been charged with the crime, but who knows whether that person is guilty or not. Innocent until proved guilty. But thinking about Brian Thompson and his Mars semisquare Pluto, you can see it's probably quite a close semisquare between Mars and Pluto. So we could see that in a couple of ways. We could see that about him as a CEO of a health insurance company. He wants to be powerful, and he was a very rich man. I think for someone who didn't start his own business. I mean, okay, if you've started your own business, you get to keep a lot of the profits. But just as an employee, I mean, I believe he had tens of millions of dollars, and he wasn't. He wasn't that old. He was 50 when he died. But so he was an extremely rich man through working for an insurance company. And what was it that made him so successful? Maybe that Mars semisquare Pluto. Maybe as a businessman, he was completely sort of ruthless in pursuing his own goals, what he was trying to achieve. But Mars semisquare Pluto might also say something about what you're attracting. And if you're someone who asserts a lot of power, then you attract a lot of power, and you attract Mars semisquare Pluto actions, like being gunned down in a street in New York. And someone completely different is Kim Kardashian. Kim Kardashian has Mars she has Mars semisquare Pluto, and there's Mars and Mars semisquare Pluto. I mean, I don't really want to talk about her, but she comes up when I look for people who have Mars semisquare Pluto. I don't know what that's about. It might be about her ambition, sheer ambition, wanting to be a hugely successful reality TV star. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. Mars semisquare Pluto. Remember, Mars is a male planet, so that may say something about the kind of men she's attracting. Does that say something about Kanye West? You would have think Mars semisquare Pluto could be about controlling men. Could be something about her father. I think her father was quite a famous lawyer, and so that may also be linked with Mars, with the Mars semisquare Pluto. And when you're thinking about the semisquare between Mars and Pluto, the sesquiquadrate is the same. It has the same effect, at least in theory. And so Dick Cheney, the former vice president who recently died, he had Mars sesquiquadrate Pluto. There's pretty closely sesquiquadrate, and here just power. He wants to be in control, and I think that is shown by his life. And he certainly was in control in the Bush presidency. He was a very powerful vice president, and he had definite ideas about American foreign policy, and he was to an extent responsible for Bush's war against Iraq, which of course killed hundreds of thousands of people, died because of that war. And Dick Cheney must take responsibility, or some responsibility, for that. And there is his Mars sesquiquadrate Pluto. So that's it with Mars sesquiquadrate Pluto. I could have said more about it, but I just wanted to remind you that this is the main aspect of today, and it may colour how we experience the day. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.